In today's video we're going to be designing a 1250 point list from the Space Marine Codex. Hello, welcome to Planet 40k. So in our latest flash poll on the community tab within the channel, we saw that the list build option won with 54% of the vote. So here we are today, we're going to be doing that video. And as for the shout out of today, it's going to go to Caleb Robertson for their comment relating to the Thunderfire Cannon review we did recently. Okay, so to 1250 points with Space Marines. Now, due to the chapters and all that jazz, I'm going to try and keep this more generic. We will dive into chapter specific lists as time goes on, but to start us off with the first Space Marine list on the channel, we need to start very generic. That way you can adapt the list if you wished to your chapters, maybe tweaking the list for more unique units such as maybe Sanguinary Guard or Deathwing Terminators and whatnot. Also, after the list build, we're going to be putting together a rough idea on what type of secondaries we're going to be looking at, along with a rough game plan. This is all before knowing what the mission actually will be. We're just going to presume that it's going to be at random. The reason we're going to be looking at the secondaries is so we don't get overwhelmed on the time of the game, trying to work out what secondaries and tactics that we're going to relate to the random mission selected. Believe me, I've done that more times than I would like to say, and doing that almost ensures you've lost already, unless you're a really experienced player that remembers virtually every rule and buff during the heat of battle. I tend to get quite flustered pre-game, so I need to prepare better. So we can all do with this video today. So this list that we're going to be doing today all fits in a patrol detachment, so nice and easy on the command points. So let's begin the list with the HQ and the Warlord of the list. Currently I love running the Primaris Chaplain on a bike. Now he works in virtually any chapter, so it would make sense to get him in this list today. I'm going to be spending 25 points to give him the Master of Sanctity chapter command, which gives him an extra litany in battle. Now he's coming in with his Absolver bolt pistol and his Crozius Arcanum. But the Arcanum is going to be upgraded for the Benediction of Fury Relic, so it has an extra point in AP and damage, but 6s will also inflict mortal wounds. Now this weapon is going to stack with some of the buffs and abilities, so hold on to that thought. Now I did previously want the Wise Orator Warlord trait so that the litanies inspire on a 2+, but I've got other plans. So although at the time of building this list I was quite torn, and you'll see why in a bit. So instead I'm going to be going with the Imperium Sword Warlord trait. So this is effectively going to give him the reroll to the charge rolls for the Warlord, as well as if he does make a charge or heroically intervenes, then until the fight is resolved, you're going to be adding 1 to the strength and attacks characteristics. So it's quite important that it says until the fight is resolved, so it's not just the first round of combat there. So keep track of all these buffs, I'm going to be adding them up in a minute. They're going to start to stack quite nicely. As for litanies, I get to select 2 of them, as well as the Litany of Hate due to the Master of Sanctity bonus. So I'm going to go with Catechism of Fire, which allows a core or character unit within 6 inches of the chaplain to add 1 to the wound roll when they're making a ranged attack, which I plan on using on a nearby unit, which we'll go over later in the video. And the second litany is the Mantra of Strength. Now this one's going to add 1 to the attacks and the strength characteristics, as well as 1 to the damage characteristics of the melee weapon that the chaplain uses. Okay, so let's total up the buffs, starting with the amount of attacks. So a Bite Chaplain has a base stat for the attacks of 4, which becomes 5 in the first round of combat due to Shock Assault. Then the Imperium Sword trait grants an extra 1, making that 6. Then the Mantra of Strength Litany, if you get that roll off, there's another attack there, making a total of 7 attacks. As for the actual weapon stats, the base strength was strength 6, the Imperium Sword puts it to strength 7, then the Mantra of Strength Litany puts it to strength 8. Then the actual damage from the relic was previously a damage 3, but with the Mantra of Strength it also adds an extra damage there, so it's going to be damage 4. So all in all it's 7 attacks at strength 8, minus 2 AP, which will become minus 3 AP in the Assault Doctrine, and the damage is a flat 4. Disgusting. Don't forget also that you can reroll the charge roll as well with the Imperium Sword Warlord trait. Now I've gone with this combo, but if you are tweaking the list you could opt for a Librarian as well, maybe with the jump pack to cast Might of Heroes for an extra bit of strength and toughness, as well as an extra attack. Now that combo is very filthy, but at 1250 points I didn't really want a Librarian in there. This all kind of does come down to that 3+ litany roll though, which is kind of why I was torn on the Warlord trait. Yes, you can get the litany off on a much easier 2+ roll with the Rise Orator Warlord trait, but that Imperium Sword trait gave the extra strength and attack, as well as the reroll to charge, and I didn't really want to go down to strength 7, I didn't feel it was worth it. Now if you are playing Blood Angels, then you only really need a strength 7 for the majority of the time anyway, as you get a +1 to the wound roll. But all in all, Bite Chaplains is setting us back 140 points, which I think is an absolute bargain. Okay, on to the troops next. I've gone with 3 selections for the troop choices, the first one being a 5-man unit of Heavy Intercessors. These guys are just amazing, toughness 5 with 3 wounds, and they've got a choice of some pretty good long range weaponry. So they're just going to be camping on the home objective to weather the storm. Now I've gone with the Executioner bolt rifles for the unit, which are a longer 42-inch range weapon, which is strength 5, minus 2 AP, and the damage is 2. Now in turn 1 this is going to be minus 3 AP. Now the other weapons are just fine, but I just wanted the AP and damage for this unit, which is going to cost me 140 points. The second troop unit is going to be a 5-man unit of assault intercessors. Now these are more of a throwaway unit, they can go in and cause some trouble, maybe steal a mid-ground primary objective. They also work out as a reasonable good counter-charge unit and a counter-deep strike unit due to the amount of attacks they actually have. Now a min unit of 5 of these in the first round of combat has a total of 21 attacks when you include the sergeant and the shock assault. Don't forget the Astartes chainsaw will also give you an extra attack per model. These also carry the heavy bolt pistols, which I think are really good, really solid as far as pistols go. Not only are they 18-inch range, but if you're still in combat in your own turn, so the second round of combat onwards, you can then fire them into engagement range, and they're effectively an additional attack because they've got the same stats as the chainsword. Now the unit does get better in the assault doctrine, giving an extra -1 AP on the weapons. Now I've also added a 5-point power sword to the sergeant, so we will lose the extra attack because he's not got the chainsword anymore, but he's now got a -3 AP weapon. Now you might not really need this, but I had 5 points spare at the end of the list build. So this unit is only going to cost me 100 points. So the third selection is the unit of 5 infiltrators. Now due to the concealed positions ability, they can deploy outside of our deployment area but can't be within 9 inches of enemy units or the enemy deployment zone. So this is good twofold. Firstly, you can park them on an objective that's further out to hold on to, and secondly, which is the most important reason, is that they can deny deep strike space. Usually units entering from reinforcements can't come within 9 inches of enemy models, but these guys actually increase that radius to a 12 inch with their Omni Scramner ability. So if you have deployed your backline well and you have this unit out front, you're not leaving much ground for things like Terminators coming in from deep strike. They also carry the marksman bolt carbines, which are effectively bolt guns, but any 6s to hit will auto wound regardless of the enemy's toughness. So that's the 3 troop selections and roughly what's going to be happening with them. Technically the patrol detachment is now legal as I have a HQ and a troop selection in place. So this unit is going to be costing 120 points. Next we move on to the elite section. Now staying with the idea of concealed positions, I've gone with an Invicta tactical warsuit. Now in the review I did, I wasn't that impressed with the warsuit, but since then I've played a fair amount of games both using him and opposing him, and he's actually really good. So I'm not afraid to say that I got that one wrong. Now I did give him a 3-star rating, but I think it's more closer to a 4-star. I was overly harsh with how long it would last if you deploy it so forward, as the vehicle also has the concealed positions ability. However, it does have 13 wounds and toughness 6, and it's just a fantastic distraction card effects. Let's quickly glance at that loadout. So the Incendium Cannon, which is virtually a 2d6 heavy flamer that auto hits. It's also got the Fragstorm Launcher for a bit of anti-horde. It's got the Heavy Bolter, which is strength 5 and 2 damage, and the Twin Iron Hail Heavy Stubber, which is 8 strength 4 shots, so lots of DACA there. But the main thing I love here is the Invicta Fist, which is strength 14, -3 AP and a flat 3 damage. Now if this thing is 9 inches away from your enemy deployment, whether you're going first or second, this is going to be a priority threat for your opponent. Now if you do go first, it's obviously amazing because it moves 10 inches, so you'll easily be within 1 inch in turn 1 to make that first turn charge, and you've got 5 attacks on the charge. Now your opponent may not exactly deploy on the line of their area, but that just pens them in further if they don't. The warsuit also gives your other units within your list time to move up the board. They shouldn't really be getting targeted while the warsuit is in their face. Now this thing won't last all game long by any means, but you've virtually thrown an atom bomb into your opponent's deployment zone on turn 1, they're not going to like it one bit. And as mentioned, that concealed positions, which also acts as another deep strike denial space, so you're really penning them in with the warsuit and the infiltrators. So the warsuit is 160 points, which is a tad pricey, but I think it's worth it. Now the second elite unit is a dreadnought. It's going to be the Redemptor Dreadnought. Now I love this dreadnought personally. It just has everything you need. 13 wounds like the warsuit, toughness 7 this time, and it moves 8 inches. Now the loadout I've selected for this one is the Macroplasma Incinerator for the anti-tank, the Onslaught Gatling Cannon for 5 points for the 8 strength 5 shots, the 2 Fragstorm Launchers for the strength 4 DACA, then I've added the Icarus Rocket Pod for 5 points too. Not really for anti-flyers, just for an extra weapon. It's strength 7 and 2 damage, so it'll easily make its points back for sure. It's also got that Redemptor Fist, which is strength 14, -3 AP, and the damage is a big D3 plus 3. So you're averaging 5 on the damage. Now this thing is a unit that you can decide on where you want to go with it within the game, because it hits hard, it shoots hard. So if you do want to go marching up the board with it, go for it. If you want to protect a key area, you can do that too. I would like to use the Wisdom of the Ancient stratagem. It's only 1 command point. It either allows you to reroll 1s to hit or 1s to wound. The rerolling 1s to hit works better with the Plasma Incinerator, so you can supercharge it every time with less risk. Also a little side note here, if you are playing Deathwatch, you can actually stick this Dreadnought into the Teleportarium for 1 command point. Now you will lose the first turn of shooting, but throwing them into a key area in turn 2 could be another huge problem for your opponent. But I think the Invicta Warsuit does a better job at that with the concealed positions. So this Dreadnought is costing 185 points, so it's another pricey one here, but there's lots of DACA coming out from the elite section in particular here, and they're also going to soak up a lot of firepower. So onto the fast attack, there's 2 selections here that I've gone with. The first is a unit of Inceptors. I've gone with the min unit here. I've gone with the Assault Bolters, which are only 18 inches, but they carry 2 each, totaling 6 shots per man. or 18 shots for the unit, each one at strength 5 minus 1 AP with 1 damage, and then you can make better use of this in the tactical doctrine to get it to minus 2 AP. Now you can opt to put them into reserves and pop them out in turn 2 because they've got the Death from the Skies ability, which will probably work best to get straight into range and be targeting the correct enemy units, because you've only got 18 inches, you don't want to be spending half the game flying around the board with them. Now these guys should be going for the enemy troop choices that are looking to score primaries all game, jump down, wipe them out. Now it is nice that they've got a toughness 5 and 3 wounds, yet they're moving 10 inches, so it's pretty good those. To further add to their protection, you have got the stratagem, which is quite commonly used. It's transhuman physiology for 1 command point used on a Primaris unit, and effectively they can't be wounded on less than a 4+ when targeted. So this unit's coming out at 120 points, so they should easily be making those points back up. Now don't be afraid to wipe out a unit and just sit on an objective if you need to. The game is won on points after all. Now the second fast attack slot is going to go to an Outrider squad. Now this is 150 points for a unit of 3. They're going to ride or die with the chaplain on a bike. Now these bikes can shoot with 4 shots each if they're within 15 inches with the rapid fire weapons, and that's at a minus 1 AP with the twin bolt rifles. They also love getting the charge on because they've got the ability called Devastating Charge, which is basically an extra 2 attacks on the charge per model. So we have 2 attacks base, 1 more each for Shock Assault, then another one for the Chain Swords, then 2 more each for the Devastating Charge ability, and the Sergeant gets 1 more. It's going to come to a total of 19 attacks from only 3 models at minus 1 AP or minus 2 in the Assault Doctrine. And then don't forget that second litany we chose at the start of the video, which were the Cascades of Fire. You can select a core unit within 6 inches of the priest to add 1 to the attack's wound rolls with the ranged attacks. This litany can easily be replaced with the Recitation of Focus litany. Again, it's a core unit within 6 inches of the chaplain, and it's going to add 1 to the attack's hit rolls at range. Now, in fact, let me run some maths on this. The Cascades on Fire would result in about 8.4 wounds before saves are made, and that's against toughness 4. Now if you're using the Recitation of Focus, it's going to be 7.9 wounds using the same toughness 4 models. So I'm going to be sticking with the Cascades on Fire, as a large portion of the game is at toughness 4, but you make the call on that one. So as mentioned, these guys are with the chaplain, so they're going to provide a lookout sir bubble. They should be mopping up targets or going in for the big kill with the chaplain's super beefed up profile. They shouldn't really be getting targeted either due to that war suit breathing down enemy necks. Okay, on to the last section, having the list, which is probably the most important one here. I'll have to explain why. So it's a min unit of Eradicators. It's going to cost 135 points to fill them as their stock loadout. So I've gone with the Melter Rifles due to points. Now these I want to pay the command point to put them into reserves, as a lot of my experiences with deploying them in game and turn 1 isn't great due to them only having a 24-inch range. So they tend to get picked off early and they've done nothing. So I'm going to be putting them into reserves, which then forces your opponent to hide everything big within the centre of their deployment, knowing that in turn 2 onwards you can just walk these guys in and annihilate something big, because they can fire twice at the same target with the Total Obliteration ability, so your opponent will not want to be placing any vehicles or characters on the flanks of the board. So this perfectly ties up with the idea of having an Invicta Warsuit deploying in the centre of the board, preferably as forward as possible, and targeting that big unit that they're trying to hide, because they won't want the Eradicators going anywhere near it. So the Invicta Warsuit has got a great target there if they go for that. Now this does potentially leave the Eradicators without a prime target, but they're still useful at removing virtually anything. As long as they get their 135 points back in terms of models removed, then their job is done. Remove a unit, get them over to an objective and camp on there. Still toughness 5 with 3 wounds at the end of the day due to their Gravis armour, which also allows them to use the Unyielding in the face of the foe stratagem for 1 command point, which is if they're selected for an attack with the damage characteristic of 1, then you're going to +1 to their saving throw, so giving them a 2+ armour save. Okay, so that's the actual list build. Next we're going to consider the secondaries for the list. Now we need to narrow it down so that on the day when we play we know roughly what we want to know. Now there may be a secondary included within the mission, but we can make a single decision there rather than trying to make all the decisions at once. Now I know a lot of the secondaries relate to what your opponent brings, but a lot of pro players that do well within tournaments almost completely forget that and they just prepare the secondaries that relate to their own units. But of course if you see an opportunity, take it. Like, you already have an order of the 3 that you want to keep. But for example, if your opponent brings tons of characters, that's an opportunity to take Assassination. So you remove the worst selected option that you've got and take Assassination. But let's go through some of the new chapter approved 2021 secondaries and let's see which ones will favour our list. So I'm only going to pick out the ones that are relevant here. So from the Battle Supremacy category, you've got Engage on all fronts. So you score 2 victory points at the end of the turn if you've got 1 or more units that are wholly within 3 different table quarters and more than 6 inches away from the centre of the battlefield. Then you can score 3 victory points instead if you do that again but with all 4 table quarters. So scoring 2 points per round is pretty doable. That's only going to net you 10 points out of the maximum 15. Scoring 3 points per round could be a little bit trickier, especially late game. The slight issue is not being allowed to be within 6 inches of the centre with those units. Firstly, because it's a smaller game at 1250 points, so it's going to be a smaller map size. And secondly, maybe one of those objectives is in the centre of the board. All depends on the mission, I guess, but I'd have this as a consideration for now. From the same list, you've got Stranglehold. So this one's directly competing against the Engage on All Fronts. You can't have both of them from the same category. But this is another doable option. You're scoring 3 victory points at the end of the turn if you control 3 or more objective points, and you've got to control more objective markers than your opponent. So with our concealed positions and 2 units coming in from reserves, it is doable, but I do have a slight concern though, as this relies on the mission being kind of kind to you. Some missions only have 4 objectives, so that's going to mean you need 75% of the objectives, which isn't that easy. Some have maybe 6, so getting 3 is okay, but you need to also have more than your opponent, so you're going to need to take 1 more to make 4. So all your opponent really needs to do is hold on to their 3 and you're not scoring this secondary. To be honest, I think I'm going to bin this one off. It's looking most likely that I'm going to be taking Engage on All Fronts. But let's continue and see how we go. So from the No Mercy, No Respite options, they all rely on your opponent's list. So we don't really want to be planning around that. I mean, you can do if you really want. I'm going to try a plan around the list we've actually built. But from the Shadow operations, we can use the Retrieve Octarius data, which is a new one from the chapter approved. It's an endgame objective. So it is an action for 1 infantry unit excluding characters. And they can do it in the movement phase. If they're wholly within a table quarter, which has not already been done before, then you've got to be more than 6 inches away from another table quarter. And you simply complete the action in your same turn. And at the end of the battle, if you will score 4 victory points if you've received 2, you will score 8 victory points if you've received 3, and then you score 12 victory points if you get all 4. So you can't obviously redo the same corners. Once a table quarter is done, that's it. So again, this is going to relate to table quarters, which could tie in quite nicely with Engage on All Fronts. And you don't have to wait an entire turn to do it, so it can't really be denied. So all you're really doing is simply foregoing a unit for the turn. Unfortunately, you can't max this one out for 15 points. But I think it's okay scoring just 12 because it's actually achievable. Now we've actually got 4 units that can actually do this, as it's an infantry only one. However, 2 of them are not in on turn 1 because we've got the Eradicators in reserves, and the Inceptors could be deep striking in. But the Heavy Intercessors and the Assault Intercessors could get the 2 quarters done that are near your own deployment zone in the first turn as well, so you'll already have 4 points right off the bat there. Then either the Assault Intercessors, the Eradicators, the Inceptors need to be working out how to score the other 2. I can't really see the Heavy Intercessors going for the other 2, otherwise you may as well just pay for another unit of Assault Intercessors, but this one's definitely an option. As for Purge the Enemy, again this one relates to opponent's lists. And the Warcraft option, we don't have any Psychers unless you did manage to bring that Librarian in for your Chaplain combo. And the Arbor of the Witch option really does depend on the enemy Psychers. So already I'm leaning to Engage on All Fronts and Retrieve Octavius data as the 2 main options. Third one, you'll just have to see the mission or your opponent's list. Also, don't forget that the Space Marine supplements come with their own chapter approved selections for the secondaries, which should easily make one for your list here. But if your supplement and the mission are no good for your list, then yes, on the day you can scan over your opponent's list. You only now need to select 1 as opposed to scratching around trying to get 3 secondaries before the game begins. The way to look at it, just look at your opponent's list. Are there a lot of characters? Are there a lot of Psychers? Are there Titan units, monsters? Find the secondary that relates to those said units, and that will be your plan B. And hopefully this should see you through. Guys, I hope this list serves you well, and let me know what you would tweak and why. Also, if you've got any other ideas on the secondaries, let me know too. Put it down in the comments. Please like and share the video on your social platforms, and sub if you are new. The content is frequent here on the channel. So guys, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.